Jack gets caught up in a complicated relationship with a powerful financial executive, and this connection sets him on the path to becoming the Wolf King. But there's a bigger secret lurking behind it all. Let's get back on track. Jack is a college senior, with just one semester left before graduation. Like many of his classmates, he's been actively seeking an internship that will help him land a full-time job after graduation. But Jack is feeling increasingly frustrated. Despite trying hard for about 2 months, his efforts have yielded little results. With half the semester already gone and no job offers in sight, he's growing more anxious by the day. There's also the added responsibility of taking care of his elderly grandfather, who's in his 70s. Jack was raised by his grandfather and can't just leave him to fend for himself. That evening, Jack is driving his grandfather's old car to a job interview. He tried 2 different interviews earlier in the day, but failed both times. Jack isn't great with people and struggled to present himself well, but he's hopeful that tonight's interview will at least put him in the running for a position. The car slowly cruises through the city streets. Towering buildings and bright neon lights line the roads, and the bustling crowds give the city an exciting, vibrant atmosphere. Jack, a rookie driver, focuses on the road. Suddenly, he feels a tight pressure on his finger, where he's wearing a ring. The pressure causes a sharp pain that spreads from his finger to his wrist and then up his arm. The pain follows his veins, intensifying until it reaches his chest. In an instant, Jack feels as though his heart is being crushed under tons of weight. His chest tightens, making it hard for him to breathe. He fights through the pain and manages to pull over to the side of the road, leaning over the steering wheel, gasping for air. His mind goes blank, and everything around him seems to fade into silence. The world becomes eerily still, and his vision blurs. After a few moments, Jack starts to recover. He takes a few deep breaths, reconnecting with the outside world. The city skyline, the streetlights, the bustling people, and the passing cars come back into focus. Just as he's beginning to regain his composure, a loud rumble shakes him to the core, like a building collapsing. Jack jumps in shock, trying to locate the source of the noise. What he finds leaves him stunned. The source of the rumbling was the overpass ahead of him, which has just collapsed. Panicked, Jack rushes out of the car to check. The overpass he was about to drive under has suddenly crumbled, sending cars and debris crashing down onto the street below. From the height, it's clear that anyone who was on that overpass is likely dead or severely injured. Jack instinctively touches his chest and the ring on his finger. To his surprise, the pain he felt earlier has completely vanished. His body feels perfectly normal, even stronger than before. Then it hits him, if the ring hadn't caused him that intense pain, he would have kept driving, and he would have been on that overpass when it collapsed. He and his car would have fallen, and he would have died alongside everyone else. Jack shudders at the thought. Below the collapsed bridge, people are screaming. Emergency responders, firefighters, paramedics, and police officers are rushing to the scene. Families are wailing in despair, mourning the lives lost. Jack's phone rings. It's the company he interviewed with earlier, probably calling to remind him about the interview. But Jack can barely focus on the phone call. He's still disoriented from the strange events of the evening. He thinks to himself, was it this ring that saved me? Hey! You scared little kid! Get out of here, we're sealing off the area. A police officer shouted at Jack from a short distance. Only then did Jack snap back to reality. In a panic, he quickly drove away from the accident site. His phone kept ringing, but Jack no longer cared about the interview. His mind was in chaos, and all he wanted to do was rush back to his room and hide. He didn't know if today's encounter was a blessing or a curse. The car finally pulled over by the side of a rundown neighborhood street. Jack quickly got out of the car and hurried into a nearby apartment building. Once home, he tossed the car keys onto the living room table. He called out to his grandfather, Edwin, and then went straight to his room without another word. His grandfather slowly opened the door to his room and shuffled out, grumbling, "You little rascal, you're getting more and more impolite." Grandfather's name was Edwin Harris, a man in his 70s. Though his movements were always slow, he never made mistakes. He was also very wise, and the neighbors often came to him with questions. Edwin seemed to be especially skilled with matters from past times. Sometimes, he answered questions like a long-winded history teacher, as though he had lived through every detail himself. But if you asked him about more recent things, he would sigh and say, "This darn brain of mine, getting old means forgetting things," and then you'd leave disappointed. Jack wasn't sure when he and his grandfather had moved into this place. In Jack's memory, his grandfather had always been this frail, and he never talked about Jack's parents. If Jack ever asked, Edwin would tell him he couldn't remember. But the one thing Edwin did tell him was that the ring Jack wore was his father's heirloom, and he should take good care of it. Once in his room, Jack collapsed onto his bed and began to examine the ring closely. He had never really paid much attention to it before. He always thought it was just a regular ring. But today's experience made him feel like the ring was far from ordinary. The more he looked at it, the more the patterns and carvings stood out. There seemed to be an image of a fierce, powerful wolf wrapping around the entire ring. The design was incredibly detailed and three-dimensional. As the light hit the ring, there was an inexplicable aura of mystery around it. Suddenly, a faint glimmer of light began to emanate from the ring. The glow gradually expanded, and Jack stared in disbelief, not knowing what to do to stop the ring's strange behavior. The light continued to spread until it reached the ceiling. Jack was stunned. What in the world was happening?